The smoke was a ghost, a lingering memory of what Blackwood Gulch had been. It clung to the charred skeletons of homes and the soot-blackened earth, a testament to a cruelty so profound it had scorched the very soul of the land. This was a place where hope had died, not with a whisper, but with the roar of a consuming fire. Into this graveyard of dreams rode a woman alone, her face veiled against the ash-filled air. Her name was Elara Vance, though no one here knew it yet. She was a widow, a woman hollowed out by a grief so vast it felt like its own country, a desolate landscape within her. She had come to this dead place not to mourn, but to ignite a fire of her own. She guided her horse past the blackened sign that once read "Welcome to Blackwood Gulch," now just a jagged piece of burnt timber. Her eyes, the color of a stormy sea, scanned the destruction. She wasn't looking for survivors. She was looking for one man. The heart of the town had been ripped out, but on its desolate edge stood a small, unburnt ranch. It was an island of defiance in an ocean of ruin, but its defiance was weary. The fences sagged. The barn door hung from a single hinge. And on the porch, a man sat in a crude wooden chair, his gaze fixed on the nothingness before him. This was Caleb Holt, a man as broken as the town he refused to leave. A once proud rancher, his leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, a permanent reminder of the day Bartholomew Thorne's ambition had shattered his bones and his future. He saw Elara approach, a solitary figure emerging from the haze, and his hand instinctively went to the shotgun resting against his chair. He was the last holdout, the final stubborn nail that Thorne, the land baron who owned the valley's fear, had yet to hammer down. Elara dismounted, her movements graceful despite the heavy riding skirt. She walked not with the hesitation of a stranger, but with the grim purpose of a soldier entering a battlefield. She stopped at the foot of his porch steps, her gaze meeting his. His eyes were full of suspicion and a deep, settled despair. Hers held a fire he hadn't seen in anyone, least of all himself, for a very long time. "Caleb Holt?" she asked, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the oppressive silence. He just nodded, his grip tightening on the shotgun. Strangers only meant one thing in Thorne's Valley, more trouble. "My name is Elara," she said, pulling back her veil. Her face was etched with sorrow, but also an unyielding strength. She looked at his ruined leg, at the burnt-out town behind him, and then back into his eyes. She took a breath, and with 4 words, she threw a lit match into the powder keg of his life. "You have to marry me." Caleb stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign tongue. The world, which had already been tilted on its axis, seemed to spin completely off. Marry her? He'd seen 1,000 strange and terrible things in his life, but none so strange as this. A woman of obvious quality, dressed in fine, if dusty, clothes, standing on his broken-down porch and proposing marriage as if she were asking for a glass of water. Was this another of Thorne's cruel tricks? A scheme to mock his crippled state, to finally break his spirit? His face, weathered by sun and sorrow, hardened into a mask of mistrust. "Get off my land," he rasped, his voice raw from disuse. "I don't know what game you're playing, or who sent you, but I'm not interested." Elara didn't flinch. She saw the pain behind the anger, the fear behind the threat. "This isn't a game," she said, her tone softening just enough to betray the emotion churning beneath her calm exterior. "And Bartholomew Thorne did not send me. In fact, he is the reason I am here. I am proposing an alliance, Mr. Holt." "A partnership?" "Our marriage would be a legal contract, one that binds my resources to your claim on this land." Caleb let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "Your resources?" Look around you. There's nothing here but ash and dust. My acclaim is worth less than the dirt it's on. Thorne will have it all soon enough." It was then that Elara took a step closer, her voice dropping to an intense, conspiratorial whisper. "He only wins if you let him. You have the one thing I do not, a legal foothold in this valley. I have the one thing you lack, the means to fight him. He burned this town to devalue the land, to scare everyone away. He wants to buy it for nothing. But a marriage changes the legal ownership. Your property becomes our property. An attack on you becomes an attack on me. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, am not an easy person to attack. Something in her eyes, a flicker of a past tragedy, told him she spoke the truth. This wasn't a trick. This was desperation. Hers and his. What would you do if you were in Caleb's position? Would you trust this mysterious stranger? Tell me what you think in the comments below. For Caleb, the choice was between a slow, certain death of spirit, or a wild, uncertain gamble on a ghost with fire in her eyes. The next day, the circuit judge, a man deep in Thorne's pocket, performed the ceremony with a barely concealed sneer. It was the quickest, starkest wedding imaginable. There were no flowers, no guests, only the silent, charred witnesses of Blackwood Gulch. Bartholomew Thorne heard the news by midday. He was a large man, whose size was amplified by his arrogance. He sat in his opulent study, miles away from the ruin he had created, and he laughed. A crippled rancher and some mysterious widow? It was pathetic. He sent his foreman, Silas, a man with a conscience buried under years of fear, to deliver a message. Silas found Ilara and Caleb reinforcing a fence line. He dismounted, his face grim. Thorne sends his congratulations, Silas said, the word tasting like poison. He also wants you to know that his offer to buy this land still stands. $5 an acre. He considers it a generous wedding gift. Ilara wiped the sweat from her brow and looked Silas straight in the eye. Go back and tell Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice ringing with newfound authority, that the price has just gone up. This land is not for sale. Silas was taken aback. No one spoke to Thorne that way. He saw the shift in Caleb's posture, a straightening of the spine that had been bent for months. A tiny, dangerous seed of hope had been planted in the barren soil of Blackwood Gulch. The change in Caleb was subtle at first, like the first sign of green after a long winter. Ilara's presence, her sheer, unyielding will, was like water to his parched soul. He began to work the ranch not with the grim resignation of a man waiting for the end, but with the focused energy of a man preparing for a siege. And Ilara, for her part, began to reveal the true nature of her plan. One evening, as the sun bled across the horizon, painting the scorched hills in hues of orange and purple, she finally told him everything. They sat at the rough-hewn table in the small cabin, a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. She unlocked a heavy, leather-bound trunk she had brought with her, the source of Thorne's initial amusement. But what was inside was no laughing matter. It wasn't just gold coins, though there were plenty. It was papers. Deeds, contracts, and letters. At the very bottom, wrapped in oilskin, was a document that made Caleb's breath catch in his throat. My late husband, Jonathan, was a good man, Ilara began, her voice thick with a grief she rarely showed. He was also a very shrewd businessman. He bought this entire valley 20 years ago, long before Thorne ever set foot here. He believed in its potential. She slid the oilskin bundle across the table. This is the original master deed to every acre of Blackwood Gulch and the surrounding territory. Thorne's claims, the town's claims, your claim, they are all subdivisions of this. He made a deal to buy the valley from Jonathan, but he was a man who preferred theft to honest trade. He arranged an accident. Her voice broke, but she quickly regained her composure. Thorne believes this deed was destroyed in the fire that killed my husband. He doesn't know it was with me. He thinks he's simply clearing out squatters. He has no idea he is trespassing on my land. Caleb stared at the deed, then at Ilara. The scope of it all was staggering. This wasn't just about his small ranch. It was about everything. It was about justice. The next day, Ilara put her fortune to work. A wagon train, paid for in advance, arrived from the east, laden with lumber, food, and tools. She didn't just offer it to Caleb, she offered it to the handful of broken families still hiding in the hills, drawn now by the impossible rumors of a fight. For the first time in a year, the sound of hammers echoed through the valley. A few small cabins began to rise from the ashes. It was a fragile, defiant sprout of a new town. Bartholomew Thorne was no longer amused. This was not the act of a foolish widow, this was a coordinated rebellion. His spies told him of the supplies, of the hope rekindling in the eyes of people he considered human refuse. He had to crush it, and crush it now. His cruelty, always simmering beneath the surface, boiled over. He sent his men not with offers, but with shovels. They rode to the creek that fed the valley, the lifeblood of the small community, and they diverted its course. Within a day, the creek bed was dry. The water was gone. The message was clear and brutal: obey me, or die of thirst. The sound of hammers stopped. Fear, cold and familiar, crept back into the hearts of the settlers. How can you fight a man who can steal the very water from your lips? The valley grew quiet again, but this was a new kind of silence. It was the tense, coiled silence of a cornered animal. The small supply of water they had stored in barrels was dwindling fast. The hope that had bloomed so brightly just days before was beginning to wither under the relentless sun. The townsfolk looked at Ilara, their eyes filled with a desperate, questioning plea. They had followed her, believed in her, but how could she fight a man who controlled the elements themselves? Caleb saw the weight settling on her shoulders. He saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the echo of her own past grief threatening to overwhelm her. He stood by her side, his crippled leg a testament to his own past defeats, but his spirit now a pillar of support for hers. "We knew this wouldn't be easy," he said, his voice low but firm, meant for her alone. "He's trying to break us. Don't let him." It was in that moment of despair that salvation arrived from the most unexpected quarter. A lone rider approached the ranch at dusk, not with the arrogance of Thorne's men, but with the furtive caution of a deserter. It was Silas, the foreman. He dismounted, his face a roadmap of internal conflict. He had been a loyal man his whole life, but loyalty to evil had its limits. "He's gone too far," Silas said, his voice barely a whisper. "Taking the water, there are children here. I can't be a part of it anymore." He looked from Ilara to Caleb, his eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness. "There's a hidden spring on Thorne's own property. An old well. It's deep and the water is clean. He uses it for his personal manor. He thinks no one knows about it." He then gave them the information that would change everything. But that's not all. He's tired of waiting. He's hired a dozen guns from out of the territory. They're hard men, the kind who shoot first and never ask questions. They ride tomorrow at dawn. He's not going to scare you out this time. He's going to bury you." The air grew thick with the coming confrontation. There was no more time for strategy, no more time for building. The final battle was upon them. If you're enjoying this story of courage and justice, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what happens next. Ilara gathered the small group of settlers, no more than 15 able-bodied men and women. There was no talk of running. This was their land, bought and paid for with their suffering. They would make their stand here. They worked through the night, not building cabins, but barricades. They turned wagons on their sides and piled furniture behind windows. As dawn broke, casting long, ominous shadows across the valley, they were ready. The rhythmic thunder of hoofbeats grew louder, a drumbeat signaling their doom or their deliverance. Bartholomew Thorne rode at the head of his private army, a cruel smile on his face. He saw the pathetic barricades and chuckled. He would enjoy this. He trotted his horse forward, stopping just out of rifle range. "Halt," he boomed, his voice dripping with condescending power. "And the little widow. Your games are over. I'll give you one last chance. Walk away with nothing but the clothes on your backs, or be carried away in pine boxes." It was not Caleb who answered, but Ilara. She stepped out from behind a barricade, walking calmly into the open space between the two forces. She held no weapon in her hand. There was only a single, rolled-up piece of oilskin. "This land is not yours to take, Bartholomew," she called out, her voice clear and ringing with an authority that stunned every man present. Thorne laughed. "Brave words, little bird. But words don't stop bullets, no," she agreed, a small, sad smile on her face. "But laws do." She slowly unrolled the document. "This is the original master deed to the entire Blackwood Valley, signed and sealed by Governor Miller himself. It predates your forged claims by a decade. You are not a landowner, Mr. Thorne. You are a trespasser. And these men you've hired. She turned her gaze to the mercenaries, her eyes sweeping over them. They are about to commit murder on behalf of a common thief. Thorn's laughter died in his throat. He squinted, trying to make out the document from a distance. He saw the faded ink, the official ribbon, and the unmistakable shape of the territorial governor's seal. A cold dread, an emotion he hadn't felt in years, washed over him. It couldn't be. It was supposed to have been destroyed. The hired guns shifted uneasily in their saddles. They were killers for pay, not fools. There was a vast difference between running off squatters for a powerful landowner and being caught in a legal war with the true owner of the land, especially one holding a governor's deed. Their loyalty was to money, not to Thorn, and a lengthy prison sentence was bad for business. It's a forgery! Thorn roared, his voice a little too loud, a little too shrill. He spurred his horse forward, his face a mask of purple fury. His plan, his empire, was crumbling before his eyes because of one woman and a piece of paper. He reached for the deed, intending to rip it from her hands, to destroy it once and for all. But Caleb was ready. Moving with a speed that defied his crippled leg, he lunged forward, grabbing the bridle of Thorn's horse. The animal reared in panic, and Thorn, caught off balance, tumbled gracelessly to the ground. He landed in the dust at Ilara's feet, his arrogance and power gone, replaced by the pathetic scrambling of a common bully. At that precise moment, another group of riders appeared over the ridge. It was the county sheriff, a man named Brody who had long been cowed by Thorn's influence, followed by Silas and a half-dozen deputies from the next county over. Silas had ridden through the night, not just to warn the settlers, but to fetch the law that had finally found its courage. Sheriff Brody dismounted, his eyes fixed on the deed in Ilara's hand and the sprawling, dust-covered form of Bartholomew Thorn. "Thorn," the sheriff said, his voice finding a strength he didn't know it had, "you're under arrest. For trespassing, for the illegal diversion of water, and for the murder of Jonathan Vance." The last charge hung in the air, a stunning revelation that sealed Thorn's fate. Silas had not only told them about the well, he had told them everything he knew about Thorn's criminal past. The hired guns, seeing the tables had turned so completely, wisely raised their hands in surrender. The siege was over. The war was won. The epilogue of Blackwood Gulch was not written in fire and ash, but in sweat and timber. With the legitimacy of Ilara's deed and the capital from her fortune, the town was reborn. The families returned, not as beaten-down refugees, but as pioneers with a stake in their own future. They rebuilt their homes, a general store, a school. The sound of hammers was no longer a sound of defiance, but a sound of creation. Bartholomew Thorn was tried and convicted. His wealth was confiscated, his power broken forever. He would spend the rest of his days in a stone cell, a forgotten tyrant whose name became a cautionary tale whispered to children. Silas was given a plot of land and a chance to build an honest life, his act of courage earning him a place in the community he had helped save. And what of Ilara and Caleb? Their marriage, born of desperation and strategy, slowly transformed. It was a foundation of shared struggle and mutual respect that blossomed into a quiet, profound affection. Caleb, with Ilara by his side, became the respected leader of the new town, his physical limp no longer a symbol of what he had lost, but a reminder of what they had all overcome. His spirit, once broken, now stood taller than any man in the valley. One evening, a year after her arrival, Ilara stood with Caleb on the porch of their new, properly built home, looking out over a valley twinkling with the lights of a thriving community. The ghost of smoke was gone, replaced by the sweet scent of pine and progress. She had come to a place of death seeking justice, and in doing so, had found life, not just for a town, but for herself. She had discovered that the greatest fortune she possessed wasn't the gold or the deed, but the courage to fight for what was right, and the love that could grow in the most unlikely of soils. Their story proves that even in the deepest darkness, a single spark of defiance can light the way home. To see another story of incredible courage, click on the video now showing on your screen.